X-Men 97 is officially one of, if not the best project Marvel Studios has ever produced. I'm honestly still reeling from watching this incredible feat of television, something that I didn't know if it was going to work out when I first saw that trailer. I was like, okay, we got a cynical revival of a 90s show. No, not at all. It was perfect. Everything down to the gorgeous look of the animation, something that I actually was a bit skeptical of because I was a little wary of how they were blending 3D and 2D, and it wasn't working for me. But you know what? I am so happy to have been proven wrong. When I tell you, I can't remember the last Marvel TV series that I waited with such bated breath each week. I mean, screw Marvel, just Disney Plus, any Disney series. I can't remember the last time that I anticipated something this much. I mean, this is literally the second video I'm releasing to discuss the project because, folks, one wasn't enough. So now that the dust has settled and all of us have had a chance to watch the entirety of this first season in all of its glory, it's time for us to discuss and dissect what made this show a mutant masterpiece. To me, my followers, let's jump in. But first, great news, fellow mutants. You no longer have to be a telepath like Charles Xavier to achieve such a fantastically strong brain. So stop building your mock cerebros and get brilliant. You've probably heard me talk about Brilliant before, and for good reason. It's my favorite learning platform, and they rule because it's designed to be uniquely effective for each individual that uses it to learn something new. While Brilliant might not have a course on how to stop Juggernaut, they do have insanely useful ones like programming, where you can get familiar with Python, or how LLMs work, where you can learn, you guessed it, how LLMs work. And if your first thoughts were, what the hell is an LLM, or why are snakes so important for coding, not to worry. Each course welcomes learners at every level and teaches you the specified skill set in a way that's both engaging and interactive to keep you interested and immersed in the material. Their first principles approach helps you build an understanding of the material from the ground up by filling every lesson with hands-on problem solving. Brilliant helps you not only to learn, but retain concepts by building your critical thinking skills through problem solving, not just memorizing. So while you're building real knowledge on specific topics, you're also strengthening your brain in general. And each lesson is designed to fit into any curriculum you're enrolled in at Xavier's School for the Gifted Youngsters, so you can ease yourself into habitual learning for even just a few minutes a day. So quit doom scrolling and become the hero you were born to be. Right now, you can try Brilliant for free for a full 30 days by visiting brilliant.org/FilmSpeak, or click the link in the description of this video to give learning a trial run, as well as receive 20% off an annual premium subscription. So join us, my fellow mutants, train your mind, watch your powers grow, and together we can put a stop to those that seek to end mutant kind. And thank you so much to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Intolerance. 97, and perhaps the X-Men in general, are built on this word. The X-Men have always been a symbol of the oppressed, a voice for the unheard, and a spotlight for those that don't feel understood by the world around them. It's the story of people who are different in a world that refuses to accept them for being so. And that's where the creator, showrunner, executive producer, writer, director, he wears many hats on this show, Beau DeMayo, comes in. In one word, 97 is focused. A focus even the great 90s show lacked at times. Characters' drives and needs are aligned at times and opposed at others, making for stronger, more well-rounded individuals. Through the return to form for these beloved characters, Beau and the team behind X-Men 97 explore the same allegories that have always been associated with the X-Men much more directly. Beau's history and personal connection to marginalized communities such as the LGBTQ+ community, Black Americans, and foster families allows him to be even more direct and explicit in the language he uses because this is his truth. There's no mincing words because he takes the words and feelings of his heart and puts them to page in order to cut to the heart of what X-Men is all about. At the middle of this conflict, we find Charles Xavier and Eric Lehnsherr, two men who feel the alluring pull to lead in a pursuit of a better future. Their diametrically opposing views on how to lead the world to this future lay the foundation for the ever-shifting debate on which this show, and X-Men in general, is built on. And that debate essentially boils down to this: what is the pathway to equality? And how much are you willing to compromise to achieve it? Eric's unbridled righteousness turns to heinous violence without Xavier's foresight. His pessimistic views of humanity's intolerance crosses over into cynicism, which informs his actions. His compulsive need to turn the other cheek and grant forgiveness before or without the apology sometimes needs a push past politics that only Magneto can provide. Alone, they're largely flawed or self-destructive leaders capped by their one-track mind, but together, they balance each other out, shattering the ceiling and possessing limitless potential to enact change. Charles's absence in the first half of the season is a built-in gift, to be honest, left by the show's original run back in the 90s. It gives DeMayo the perfect opportunity to show what happens when Magneto is forced to go it alone. It's Magneto without the angel on his shoulder, and in response, humanity's fear birthed its final nightmarish reprise. Bastion is the final evolution of the Sentinel Project, the final form of human intolerance. He represents the worst aspects of both Charles and Eric's approach, and he's homicidal, genocidal even, in a way not too dissimilar from Eric's violent retribution against humanity birthed from his mutant superiority complex. While Magneto is a mutant who hates humanity, Bastion is a mutant who hates his own kind. At what point does it become self-destructive to win over your enemies? Bastion is the idea of extreme assimilation to fit in with polite society, which by extension helps the enemy destroy you. And despite all of Charles and Eric's differences, a rejection of their identity as Bastion has done is something both men would never dare consider. They would rather die than give up who they are. In this way, Bastion's mission is self-serving, whereas Charles and Eric are unquestionably selfless in their quest for equality. Starting the series with villains like Trask, Gyrick, and the Executioner works because they are a familiar form of hate, a familiar antagonist that lulls not only the X-Men, but the audience into a false sense of security despite their continued persistence. Because of this, the X-Men let their guard down, allowing something greater and more destructive to rise up in the form of Bastion, making the culmination of the X-Men fighting Bastion all the more powerful. He is the very personification of the idea they've been at war with the whole season. One of the strongest decisions made in 97 is giving Magneto a strong and persuadable platform. So strong, it might even leave you saying,
"So Magneto was right."
What 97 does for Eric Magnus Lenscher is nothing short of magnificent, from the sick new fit he wears while leading the X-Men in Charles' absence, to a powerhouse display of powers and abilities. I mean, seriously, Magneto goes like Omega level in this season, like beyond anything we've seen from him before. Magneto's storyline in this inaugural season is sheer perfection. I mean, you could really call him the protagonist of this season. We're given opportunities to see sides of Magnus we have yet to explore in a medium beyond the pages of a comic book, and it's captivating. Take this incredible scene from episode 2, Mutant Liberation Begins.
Charles Xavier entrusted me with his dream, and it does not ask you to love or embrace my kind as your own, but merely to accept that this is a shared world with a common future, and that my kind, like yours, have the right to live in it.
Magneto has always been one of my favorite Marvel characters and one of the most layered, fascinating characters in the Marvel canon for the absolutely defendable moral dilemma that he comes packaged with, and DeMayo's spot-on interpretation of him is only one of the reasons this revival kicked absolute ass. This is the most explicit Magneto has ever been outside the comics of him being right. After so many attacks, why is Magneto so wrong to want to protect his people? Why should he just sit there and take it on the chin? What does he owe us? 97 beautifully weaves a tragedy of Magneto's own making. His rage and hatred towards humanity is founded, hell, even justified at times, but it is reactionary. And in reacting the way he does, he invites retribution from the opposition because no one is willing to give an inch. And that's not to say Magneto didn't try to play their game, to take the high road, be diplomatic, and honor Charles's dream the way Charles would, because he did. but even in trying to let cooler heads prevail, his worldview is vindicated time and time again. What choice does he have but to take drastic actions in order to ensure his people's survival, ensure their basic human rights are upheld? Why should he sit there and allow genocide to go unchallenged? The only way oppression is reversed is through action. Magneto knows humanity better than they know themselves. He knows tragedies like Genosha have become commonplace, and it'll grab attentions temporarily before people return to apathy. His kind will be pitied, never aided. Tolerance is extinction. Storm's journey this season is one of reclamation after being the tragic victim of a hate crime. Someone who experienced the full force of intolerance firsthand and now lives with the trauma of bigotry. Seeing someone like Storm, a character who has always pulsed with confidence and power, reduced to an empty shell of herself, it's heartbreaking. This creates a void inside that's all-consuming, so much so that she forgets her own humanity because she's been treated so inhumanely. It's why her isolation from the rest of the team is so effective, and why her romance with Forge is so tender. By being shown love and compassion, she's able to rediscover the love she has for herself, which turns into Storm reclaiming her identity. She will not stay a victim and reject who she is, because that's letting her attacker win. It's letting intolerance win. And the end result is just fucking beautiful, man. However, Storm isn't the only member of the team victimized by intolerance. Like Storm, Jean Grey follows a similar arc of reclamation. Whose life is she living now, and who does her identity even belong to? Is she even a person anymore, or simply an idea worth leveraging or adopting? She has to find her sense of self after Sinister took it and appropriated it by way of Madeline. What's so great about this overlap is how it strengthens Storm and Jean's relationship. They aren't just two of the most important X-Men on the roster, they are two of Marvel's most important female characters, period, who are allowed to be great friends as well. Their relationship represents the intersectionality of oppression. Not every civil rights struggle is the same. Not all marginalized people are a monolith, but there is solidarity. They are connected through a shared fight for equality. Beau DeMayo and company do something equally, if not more profound, with Rogue. If the goal of X-Men 97 was to be as direct, explicit, and precise as possible in depicting real and relatable experiences as a means for those who don't understand to understand, then there's no one more integral to this mission than Rogue. She's someone who absorbs the sum total of another's life force and experience. In the words of Beau DeMayo himself, Rogue is the ultimate empath. What's so inspired about how DeMayo interprets Rogue's abilities is how he takes something that's traditionally framed as a curse and uncovers the strength, beauty, and humanity in her gift and depicts it as what it is, a gift. In a lot of ways, Rogue represents repressed love, specifically within the mutant community and, by extension, marginalized peoples. While she respects and often understands Magneto, her relationship with him is built upon a foundation of him giving her the physical intimacy she so deeply craves and is incapable of having with Remy, or really anyone else. Eric is the only person she's allowed to be with, and when he asks her to be his queen and rule with him on Genosha, it's cementing the fact that socially and politically, he is the only one society will accept her to be with. She's forced to sacrifice her love for something greater. It's only through being on Genosha, being in a seemingly safe space, seeing love in its most abundant and pure form, feeling its endless flow radiating from those around her, that she is reminded of the fact that some things are deeper than skin, and kindly rejects Eric's proposal. It is only on this island, in this moment, that she truly feels allowed to embrace who she is and love Remy. The tragedy of this whole thing is she'll never be able to tell him, will never feel whole again. Just as she embraces who she is, it's taken away from her. In an instant, the world has made her choice for her and rejected who she wants to be and the person she wants to be with. She becomes the vehicle through which we experience mutant pain, love, joy, knowledge, and sorrow, all culminating in episode 5, Remember It, with Rogue embodying the suffering of Genosha. I believe many would agree that this mid-season finale was one of, if not the best episode of the season, hands down. And quite possibly, if you're asking me, one of the best single things Marvel Studios has ever produced. They should be seriously proud of this remarkable episode of television. And it makes sense seeing as the mid-season finale was the centerpiece of Beau DeMayo's pitch to Marvel for X-Men 97. In his own words, the idea being to have the X-Men mirror the journey that any of us who grew up on the original show have experienced since being kids in the 90s. The world was a seemingly safer place for us, where a character like Storm would comment on how skin-based racism was quaint in One Man's Worth. For the most part, to our young minds, the world was a simple piece of right and wrong, where questions about identity and social justice had relatively clear-cut answers. Remember It starts as quite possibly the most joyful point in 97's first season. We get glimpses of characters, some new, some old, in the middle of their lives, experiencing romances, starting new careers, or just living their lives, which makes it that much more heartbreaking when the rug is pulled out from their feet in the episode's horrifying climax as a mortally wounded swamp rat makes his final gambit. No one goes into these horrific events knowing something horrible is going to happen. That's what makes them tragedies. It's why the loss of Gambit feels so weighty. We were invested in him, endeared to him across 2 shows, wanted to see him work things out with Rogue and continue in the direction it looked like his life was headed in. But in an instant, his life ended. No resolution, no questions answered, just over. Even though he's a fictional character, that feeling of unfulfillment, of emptiness and sorrow is so real that it truly does feel like a life ended long before it was ready to. By using a life like Gambit's as a storyline and cutting it short, Beau and the rest of the writers make you feel it. It's why, in hindsight, easily my least favorite episode of the show needed to happen and was so effective. In episode 4, Jubilee has to learn to reject nostalgia. Even though it may bring her comfort, you can't live in the past. There's a danger that comes with being complacent and stagnant. It's not enough to live, you must live responsibly and fully for the lives that weren't able to. Jubilee learns to grow up, and her loss of innocence is then amplified and echoed by the rest of the team in the wake of a future they didn't anticipate. 9/11 happened and the world turned against itself. Things weren't so safe anymore. Grassroots populist movements began to rise around the world as a whole nation struggled to deal with collective trauma and fracture at the seams of every diverse demographic. The effects we still feel today and have only been exacerbated by more collective traumas like COVID or several recessions. The ramifications of Genosha continue to echo, making Remember It a proper mid-season finale, the turning point where X-Men 97 becomes a different show. There's no way of going back to the way it was before. An event of that magnitude radically alters the status quo, not just the permanence of death, but beyond that. Everyone's attitude changes, and the tragedy itself is discussed in a way that's given real weight. Characters react to Genosha like many of us did to 9/11 or Pulse, in a real way that makes the commentary and drama all the more effective. In our last video about 97, I talked a lot about how it was the first time I'd ever latched on to Cyclops as a character. The first time I not only got him, but loved him. But as this season progressed, it became increasingly apparent that DeMayo wasn't just trying to make him look cool. I mean, he definitely fucking did that and then some. He was filling out his character in ways we've never seen before. Scott's always carried around the baggage of abandonment with him ever since he was a kid and left by his own father. Through Charles and the X-Men, he not only found a new home that embraced the person he was, but found a father in Charles. This naturally amounted to him being a bit of a kiss-ass, a teacher's pet, which made him one of the most boring members on the team. The thing is though, 97 not only unpacks why he is the way he is, but what happens when the person you've devoted everything to just up and leaves and doesn't select you as his successor. There's sure to be quite a bit of confusion, especially when the successor is the enemy. While Jean, Madeline, I guess at this point, offers that it may have been a gift from the professor so that they could live their lives outside of the team, Scott's personal feelings behind the move blind him. Leading the X-Men in the professor's absence was his path. Who is he now that it's changed? What is his purpose? But as Charles tells him upon his return to Earth,
I wanted you two to be free, to finally be together, to have a family, a child like Nathan.
everything Charles has done has been to not only protect his family, his son in Scott, but to give them a better life than what he's had to endure. It's therefore poetic that Scott should be confronted with the same predicament as his fathers before him, and despite his noble reservations, is forced to abandon his own son, Nathan, in order to save him. Scott is grappling with his role as a father, learning to understand and empathize with the decisions his own father made when he was forced to make them himself. As a kid, you don't really comprehend these decisions. They feel selfish and unfair. But as an adult, you're afforded more perspective on why your parents make the choices they do. Scott comes to understand that of Charles and is even placed in a similar position as Charles when Nathan, aka Cable, re-enters his life. Similar to Scott, Cable is also the best he's ever been because he's more than just a hulking badass time-traveling heavy. I mean, that's cool, but give me a little bit more here. Cable clearly resents his father for abandoning him and for having to experience the death of his mother over and over again, trying to save her, but knowing he never will. He feels alone and unwanted and so fortifies himself. In so doing, the show unpacks why Cable is traditionally such a one-note, walled-up, stoic, hardened character. It's because of what Cyclops did to him and the loss of his mother. All of this culminates in a beautiful exchange where Scott finally gets to do what his father never had the chance to: say goodbye. X-Men 97 is fearless. It makes bold, daring choices in service of their characters above all else. X-Men is a thoroughly complicated and at times messy IP. It deserves the time and detail of a television series in order to fully explore each incredible character and their relation to one another. 97 is proof of that. Over the course of its first season, it has cemented itself not only as the definitive version of these characters, at least adapted from the comics, but dare I say, the crown jewel of Marvel Studios. Yeah, I know. I really feel it, guys. I loved X-Men 97, and I simply can't wait for more uncanny adventures. Until then, we must learn to absorb the lesson that the X-Men have set before us. There is no path forward in hatred. If we have any chance at a future worth living, we have to embody the traits of the tolerant. Love like Rogue, persist like Storm, break the generational cycle like Scott, and fight like hell for those who can't defend themselves like Gambit.